Ted Cruz got what he came for, I guess. He engaged in his filibuster for 21 hours. Now, we've got a number of great videos we're going to show you, but first we're going to take you from the beginning to the end, thankfully not in real time, with some video of him engaging in his filibuster. Let's watch.
Madam President, I rise today in opposition to Obamacare. I rise today in an effort to speak for 26 million Texans and for 300 million Americans. All across this country, Americans are suffering because of Obamacare. Obamacare isn't working. And yet, fundamentally, there are politicians in this body who are not listening to the people. The pleas from the American people, I tell you, in Texas, are deafening. The frustration that the United States Senate doesn't listen to the people is deafening. So I would call on all 46 Republicans to unite, to stand together and to vote against cloture on the bill on Friday or Saturday, because otherwise, if we vote with the majority leader and with the Senate Democrats, we will be voting to allow the majority leader to fund Obamacare. And voting to give that power to the majority leader, I would suggest, is not consistent with, I believe, the heartfelt commitment of all 46 members of this conference to oppose Obamacare. The only path, if we're going to oppose Obamacare, is to stand together.
So, yeah, as you can imagine, he talked at some length, 21 hours. Now, before I criticize him, I intend to, you have to give it to him. 21 hours speaking about anything or everything, that is actually pretty impressive. And so I'll give him a little bit of a clap there for that. But when it comes to the substance, no, I don't agree with him at all. First off, maybe this is this is a bit shallow perhaps, but he talks about at length there in the beginning about how they need to listen to the people. And yes, certainly there are many Americans who don't like the Affordable Care Act. I would argue many of them don't like it because they have no idea what is actually included in it. And I think that their opinion will change significantly over the course of the next few years. But yes, some don't agree. But we also know his exact tactic that he's engaging in right now. We know what the American public think about that. And even registered Republicans, only about 7 to 9% of them think that it's worth potentially shutting down the government if that's what it takes to defund Obamacare. And so, yes, he's listening to those 7 to 9%. The vast majority of the country, though, he doesn't seem to care what they think. And there are some people much closer than Texas that are trying to talk to him. There are a number of Republican senators, members of the House, including Peter King, who we'll get to eventually, telling him this is doomed to failure. You cannot succeed. You're making us look stupid, and you're probably just doing it to grandstand and build yourself up in the eyes of the voters going into some sort of presidential run. And so he's not listening to them either. So the voters, he's not too concerned with them. The politicians, the members of the media who have counted the votes and know that he can't win, he's not listening to them either. Now, he was very impressed with himself. Both you could tell in the video when he's actually talking and all the photos of him afterwards. Ali, one of our graphics guys, pointed out that he could not stop smirking after he was done speaking. But Reid was not impressed, and so we've got his reaction to the filibuster. Let's watch.
We all admire the senator from Texas for his wanting to talk. It's all due respect. I'm not sure we learned anything new. The things that he talked about had been talked about before on a number of occasions, in fact, endlessly. But it's been interesting to watch. But, Mr. President, for lack of a better way of describing this, it has been a big waste of time. The government is set to shut down in a matter of hours, just a few days. Government will close. And it's a shame we're standing here having wasted perhaps 2 days, most of yesterday and a good part of today, when we could pass what we need to pass very quickly.
I love the body language there. He's like, I want to thank him for saying what he did. He's just so tired with it. I'm sure that Reid was not there for the 21 hours. Now, Ted Cruz was joined by another of other conservative senators, the people you'd expect, Mike Lee and things of that sort. But yeah, Reid's, I'm sure, very happy to be done with the entire thing. Now, there were a number of highlights and a number of silly little things that Ted Cruz engaged in to fill up the 21 hours, and we're going to cover them shortly. But before we do that, I do want to talk generally about why we're covering this in such perhaps dismissive fashion. One, because as we've said, we've done the math and we know that this is not going to have any long-term impact, but more so because they keep trying to call it a filibuster when it is demonstrably not a filibuster. Yes, he is standing in a government building, he is talking for a very long period of time, and that seems like filibusters we've seen before, but it is not actually a filibuster because, as John McCain pointed out earlier today, filibusters delay legislation from being passed. That's the tactic that they were developed to do. That's their point. Whereas he was not delaying anything. They already know when the vote is going to be held. It's going to be held later this week. He's not delaying that at all. He's simply speaking at length. And in fact, and this is perhaps one of the funniest things there, Harry Reid obviously very happy to be done with this entire thing, but when the 21 hours were over, he offered to let Ted Cruz continue. That's how intimidated he is by the filibuster. He was like, you can go on if you want. And Ted Cruz is like, no, I think I've made my point. Although it is interesting that he was done by 1 o'clock. He was on Rush Limbaugh at 1 o'clock. And so he said early on, I'm going to filibuster until I can't stand anymore, or until I have an appointment with a relatively well-received conservative commenter, I guess. So perhaps that's not as ideologically consistent with what he says he's up there to do, but that is what he actually left for. And so he didn't delay it from being voted on. This isn't going to actually impact the legislation. He made it more of a time crunch, perhaps. Perhaps that was his mission all along. But I think it's more likely that he was just trying to make himself look cool.